There was a there were a lot of things I thought I could start with, but I picked a couple of concepts and ideas that we could reflect on since we're now in the midst of it. School has started today, and we find ourselves, um, I think, partly excited. But part of the excitement is trying to figure out if we can continue to learn from this process. But that's the thing about consciousness, right? There isn't a ceiling where we can reach that we have established. Awareness, it's always a process. But one of the concepts I want to introduce and talk and discuss about is something called the power of pause. I believe there's a whole book on that. I've never read it, but I've seen it before doing research. But the power of pause. I am a believer that next to listening, the pause is one of the most difficult forms of communication. I don't think we would consider that as a form of communication, but it is highly significant, if not more significant than any advice we could offer another person. Just like listening, the pause is equally as important and significant in terms of the effect that it creates in the context of communication, i.e., relations. So essentially, it is, as a matter of fact, I think I'll go here, or rather go there. The French use that practice in their parenting. They refer to as le pause, which is the pause, where they have their children just do as they do. And if they encounter what they perceive as a challenging situation, they permit it. They pause. They pause to see how the child responds to that challenging situation. There is the belief that it allows the child the opportunity to potentially make a mistake and learn from their experience. This itself, in effect, creates for a child who can foster perseverance. So essentially, as I refer to it as, is waiting before responding. But to pause is not simply to stop, but the pause I'm referring to is a practice in reflection. That's what pausing creates. That's what pausing offers. It's actually something I find in parents or in couples who are having difficulty communicating, stopping or pausing to reflect rather on what let's say the parent pausing to reflect on what the child is meaning. So many parents, even some parents, respond to a child before the child even finishes their sentences or their thoughts or their expressed feelings. Um, in couples, um, it works the same way. They may interrupt their partners in an attempt to finish their sentences, um, but yet one of the things I ask parents or couples to do is wait about, if they can, even 1 or 2 seconds after the child is done sharing the thoughts before responding. What the pause is, and what it does is decouple automatic process of talking and sharing, or over talking and oversharing, but it leads to reconnection. When I say reconnection, it leads to connection, but reconnection implies that there are moments when we are disconnected. So we have to make an effort to take the time, in this case, to pause so that we can listen. And because we can be disconnected, when we may not be aware entirely that we are, but that's where the pause comes in. It helps us to reconnect. And furthermore, what the pause does is that it will set a boundary between you and the child, where you may have the tendency to want to assert your authority while making the child feel small, metaphorically speaking. Um, it is not our intention to make the child feel small. As a matter of fact, advice bombing or giving advice or providing it is something that we believe that is part of our parenting. That by giving them advice, we are equipping them with what they need in order to deal with the world around them. But again, as I said, we all need boundaries, and even parents. So by pausing, that's exactly what we are doing. We are setting that boundary between ourselves and the child. Pausing also can create groundedness. Now, so it keeps us grounded, steady, fastened to awareness, or the present moment, which offers us the opportunity to be more aware. And when we are grounded or fastened to awareness, um, we are slower to judge. We are slower to criticize. We are slower to assume. And we are slower to accuse. We pause for a few seconds if we can to process not what we want to say, but what the child is thinking and feeling. We misuse pause or pausing. What I mean by that is that we do pause, but we're waiting. We're waiting for our opportunity. In that pause that we are waiting for our opportunity, it is likely we are formulating ideas ready to project onto the child. So this form of pausing um, doesn't give the child a chance to convey what they need to. One of the most ineffective parenting practices, and this is to keep in mind here is when we, the CC or the parent, responds to the child within a second after the child shares. And as I said, not even a second. Sometimes we just interrupt the child, um, attempting to finish their idea or thoughts or sentences, thinking that we are being helpful or the child is benefiting. But I do warn parents, I do warn couples, and I warn you, the CC, that such an immediate response, such an immediate reaction, when you cannot pause or when you do not pause and you respond to the child with an answer, may be actually reflecting a response of fight, flight, or freeze. I want you to really reflect on that for a moment. I am stating that when we answer too quickly, we provide an immediate answer. It is very likely a reactive response of fight, flight, or freeze. It may be an indication that you have been traumatized. So we may think we are answering the child's questions when we respond immediately, but our response may be a sign that we need to feel heard. Consider then that it's likely that our response is a learned maladaptive strategy that so happens to be expressed in our parenting communication. The lack of pause may be a sign of a maladaptive strategy that so happens is something that we have learned. So what I am insinuating is that for some of us, whether it's a parent, a partner in a couple, or a CC who responds too quickly, for a CC who may be responding too quickly, impulsively, parenting is really trying to recover from a traumatic history. We are speaking about the power of pause, the importance of pausing, how I refer to as pausing instead of responding quickly and automatically to a child helps us to maintain groundedness. That I went as far as to say that parents who make or provide an immediate answer response to a child may be demonstrating a reactive response to a response of fight, flight, or freeze. So individuals who have difficulty pausing are showing a kind of maladaptive strategy that is something that they have learned in their history. So I think it's important to mention now that I think it's quite clear that I'm not saying that you should not share your thoughts. That's not what I'm saying, but there's a right time to do that. But when we get into the habit of sharing all the time or sharing too much, we have to understand that our communication is a one-dimensional process. So parents who tend to assert their authority, I find, though this may be a sort of a sarcastic response, are expert at talking, but they struggle tremendously with listening. So oftentimes, these parents may appear to offer the right words to convey their thoughts, but because they cannot listen well, they create huge emotional and mental gaps in their relationship with their child, with their children, with the child or with their children. Furthermore, if you can pause for the child before answering and model pause, i.e., reflection, the child can learn to do the same. The fact that the child is feeling heard, they do not feel desperate or an urgency to have to talk all the time. By pausing, you show, the parents show, the CC shows that they are taking the time to reflect. The child, having been the recipient of the pause, bear witnessing to your reflection, will learn to act in accordance to your modeling. Haven't there been times that you have said, maybe you have not said, but you have heard parents say, think before you act? And yet, do you not find it ironic that we struggle with that ourselves? Yes. That is to say, we model the opposite. It is only when we act that follows our thinking. And sometimes we don't even think because we acted so quick and so impulsively that we forget to think, we forget to reflect. So if we want our kids or our students here to, we want them to act, or rather, I think a better way maybe of stating that is that we want them to act so that they can think. Remember, don't answer the child so quickly or immediately. respond with a pause, and provide the opportunity for the child to finish their thoughts or express feelings. So before I move on to the next idea, any thoughts about the le poser, the pause? I thought it would be more fancy to say it than say it in French. You got that all down. You're probably masterful at the way of the pause. Well, it just makes me think of the underlying awareness. All these different concepts that you talk about, not all, but several of just being aware. Yeah, just in the moment. Because, I mean, just today, I found myself worried, whether it was time management or based off what they were hearing or about something else. So when I wasn't just sitting, I was maybe not cutting them off. As soon as they finished, I was already on my next question. Now that I can just sit. So those moments where, and then I remember those moments where I paused, but it wasn't like, okay, we stop talking now, pause. You know, it was just, there was an awareness. I think it's a difficult thing. Well, I may mention why I believe, or maybe reasons why it could be a threat to the child when we're not able to listen to them, like a threat. That's appears dramatic way to describe it, but in some ways it is a threat to the child when they're not feeling heard. Threat to their being is what I, I believe that's what I'm implying. A child, to the nth degree, needs to feel validated, and there are many ways that we can do that, like a validated response or comment. But there are many other ways to do that as well. Listening is one that I started out mentioning as important, or pausing, something that we probably don't conceive too deeply, at least the significance of the practice of pause. Um, and I say that describing it as a threat might be an exaggerated response on my part, but to some degree, if I'm referring to the child not feeling validated is a threat to their own being, maybe it's not so great an exaggeration. And I think we believe, and I think most parents know, like, for instance, if yelling would be a threat, more of a threat. Criticizing a child may be more of a threat. Uh, verbally, or rather physically and verbally, abusing a child or aggressing a child may be more of a threat. We don't think that not pausing is a threat, but this is something I think is of great significance to keep in mind, because, as I said, if we're not pausing, then well, at least I implied rather, if we're not pausing, we're probably making it about us. So we are a threat. And the child is a threat detection system. I'll give you an example. I've had kids, many more than I can count in the past 18 years, who have said in my office, I wish my parents listen the way you do, Dr. Tran. They are a threat detection system. But just the same as they are a threat detection system, they are also an empathy detection system. They know when I am listening or not, whether I am being empathic or not. They know when I need to. Kids will say, use a quiet tone, use a gentle tone, dad or mom. Be kind, dad or mom. Yes. And when we are, they can detect that. Any other questions or comments pertaining to what I just said?
Went down a huge rabbit hole in my thoughts there. And he actually answered a lot of the questions that I had. It was just me sitting and listening. I thought a lot about what you kind of said, Paul, about not necessarily moving on, but kind of feeling that time constraint, maybe rushing things rather than saying things. And then, I went to, okay, how do we validate them? And I think about, okay, I want to validate you with words. And so, oh, yes, I see you, I validate you, but what is that teaching them? That's teaching them that they are validated by an immediate response with words. What are my actions validating that I actually want to move on to the next thing, right? Whereas if I just sit and be patient, I don't actually need words to give them validation. I just need to give them time. And by doing that, they will pick up on that. And like, this is important what you were saying. This is important what you were hearing. It's important enough that I want to spend more time with you on it. And it's validated. Otherwise, what do we teach them that they don't get that immediate validation verbally, that they're going to be seeking that? Oh, something's wrong. I didn't get it. And the anxiety builds. It's like all it takes is slowing down, pausing. That's cool.
Thank you, Dakota. All right. So let's talk about this whole notion of tough love. Once upon a time, we were proponents of this. lo and behold, we learned that it was a mistake on many levels. I know it's something that parents continue to practice because it's become really is part of our culture. I was going to say part of our nature. I'm not so sure that it is because I believe empathy and compassion is also part of our nature, which in some ways, in the context of parenting tough love, it contradicts that only because when we refer to tough love, the use of parenting um, employs, this use of parenting rather employs a harshness and a sternness about it. And the idea is to um, many points, many parts here, is to prepare the child for the world that is in fact harsh. And furthermore, it's to teach the lesson, the ultimate lesson, let's say teaching a child responsibility through the practice of tough love. Um, but this is the one now I think it's a consensus among psychologists and psychotherapists considered singularly the most damaging concept that we have proposed. And with great remorse and guilt, such a practice that has been advocated for decades now with research clearly shows that this brand of parenting is disturbingly damaging. Tough love is then further reinforced by the fact that it creates instant change, immediate response by the child. Um, Unfortunately, because it works, it reinforces the idea that it is beneficial. But the ramifications are profound. Part of the practice or the philosophy behind the practice of tough love connotes that the parents withhold kindness or compassion while promoting what's referred to as unsentimental manner of discipline. We revert or resort to this style of parenting only because we don't know any other or any better. It is easy because what it does is it empowers the parent who employs tough love. And that's what we need. Power. Power to parent. It gives us a reason to power effectively. Um, but one of the other greatest issues with parents who propose this style of parenting is that it justifies their abuse of the child, or the abuse that they are uh, imposing on the child. Unfortunately, this was discovered only decades after the fact. But now we have to come to realize that its effect, positive it may appear, is still it is stunting our own evolution. It is preventing us from thinking more vast and deep. Many of these parents who use this particular style of parenting and tough love, are incapable of honest vulnerability, and therefore they're uncomfortable with the fact that their children can be imperfect, preventing them of perceiving that their children are already perfect. So, because these parents lack the actual understanding of how children are affected by their own actions, i.e., this tough love, they lack greater understanding of their own emotion. So, what tough love does is that it's not teaching the child, but it has them avoiding their feelings. So, by projecting this idea that children need to endure hardship by their hands in an attempt to suppress their own discomfort with their lacking, the inability to resolve their own issues as a fact, they find an alternative to resolve that issue, and it is to fix and correct the child. But don't you tell a parent who uses tough love that it is beyond their ability to recognize, at least those on the more severe end of this case. Um, they are already threatened by the fact that their children, as I said, are inadequate, i.e., that they feel inadequate. So to point that out further indicates that they are inadequate. Hence, don't you dare tell them that. One thing I do want to make clear though, I work with these parents and they are by no means dumb. They're as intelligent as you and I, and some more so. They are just lacking the ability to take responsibility for themselves. Any questions or comments about that one before I continue?
You find in a space, do you have a lot of children coming from that love of love into a space like this that they may need a little bit more guidance or some boundaries in a gentle way? Um, and otherwise,
Yeah. Yes, these kids, as a matter of fact, that's a great response, Paul. These kids even relate to their peers in the form of tough friendship. They can be quite punitive, critical, sarcastic, judgmental, accusatory. Yes, and it happens. Eh, but just to make clear also, as their parents who are not dumb, they recognize what empathy and compassion is. They will respond well to it. But their response or their interactional style, the strategy in the way that they communicate is something that uh, of a reflection of the experience that they have gained. They have learned this through their parents. So you may find yourself, as you're listening to these kids, come off as quite authoritarian and even entitled, and even claiming that they have all the answers. They are merely the responses, and merely, in a lot of ways, a survival mechanism, a reflection of the need to feel that they matter. Because when you have a parent who is engaging in tough love, as I said, they withhold kindness and compassion. So these parents cannot connect to them authentically in a manner that would create deep meaning. That is not to say that these parents do not love their kids. They do, but it's called tough love. They care for their kids, but they parent toughly. They think of the kids, but they need them tough. So I propose something of, I propose kind of playing with words here. I wrote this in my book. I propose something referred to as love tough. Here I am implying to love a child beyond our selfish means. Harsh and stern, with love in the sense that we care deeply by conveying kindness and the courage to express honest vulnerability. It takes a tough parent to be willing to practice on honest vulnerability. Primarily, by loving tough, we demonstrate the intention to make a point, and that is, no matter how imperfect the child presents herself, we respond in the manner of love that is tainted by kindness, respect, and understanding. Matters not how imperfect the child. Any comments or questions? guess I'll end it with this. Okay. Um, love tough means, I guess another version of that is love relentlessly. Um, the relentless has to do with strongly recognizing that we are the imperfect and how, because we are, can create for imperfect parenting. So, as a person who is relentlessly loving, I am relentlessly aware or fostering an awareness that helps and allows me to be more understanding or more accepting or more approving. So I ended with this. All right. Part of our practice here is to strengthen the bond, and we do that by means of spending quality time with the kids here. Much of that quality time is really reflected in the way we listen. And the second thing is mutual respect. Here, mutual respect is valuing the child. Thirdly, mindful empathy, which is the strong desire and intention to understand the child. And then convey appreciation, which is another form of affirmation for the child. And when we can appreciate the child or show appreciation, we are affirming the child, confirming for them that they do matter and they are meaningful.